Okay, so welcome to the next in our series of talks on OSCEdays and the various aspects of open source, circular economy, and all related matters. We're here talking with Camila Amaya Castro, and she's an expert on blue economy and founder of the NGO association called Blue, based in Paris. And she's going to tell us a little bit about her work, about blue economy, and about something called autopoiesis. So looking forward to hearing about that. So Camila, maybe you should first introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you, your background, and your work.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks for having me. And I hear things are going great with these OSCEdays. So yes, indeed. So my name is Camila Amaya. I'm Colombian. So I'm great. Also, I'm very happy and thrilled to see the projects happening in Bogota. I grew up in the Netherlands, so Nijmegen, Rotterdam is there. Geweldig jongens, hou het op. I'm an engineer from the Netherlands, and for the last 2 years I've been investing a lot in blue economy, because that's one of the things that really has inspired me in many, many different ways. So the blue economy is many things. One thing is it's a proposal which is made by someone called Gunter Pauli, who is a serial entrepreneur, who also has done a lot of scientific work, bringing together different innovations that are being developed, innovations that already exist, that are able to implement processes of zero waste. But what it particularly is really about putting it into practice. So we know we have some great ideas, you know, whether they're within the scope of circular economy, of biomimicry. There's different concepts that are more and more known, especially by this public, I suppose, which is good. But how can we go further? Further in terms of scaling up, more people actually carrying them out, but also further in discovering new ways of doing things. One example I really like: if you have for example, a chemical problem, a problem in chemistry you want to solve, get a bunch of people together, get a lot of different types of people together, but be careful, don't be the first one to invite is not the chemist, because he will tell you what cannot be done and will not allow other people to question, yeah, but what about this? Let's try that. So really, blue economy is about thinking out of the box and doing that, proposing very concrete examples. The most known one is the fact that we have a lot of waste that is not having any value. If you take coffee, then it's only 0.2% that ends up in your cup. So we're spending $2–3 on a very little amount, and all of the rest today is considered as waste. This waste, mainly coffee grounds, can actually be used, and they are very, very good to grow mushrooms on, and particularly oyster mushrooms and shiitake love coffee grounds. So there's already all different types of entrepreneurs in Europe, as well as in other parts of the world, in Asia, in Africa, in South America, Mexico, Colombia, that are actually implementing this. There's about, I think, about 3,000 people already finding revenues with this one example. And like that, Blue Economy proposes many more. On the website, there are at least about 180 cases presented between the website and the book, and new ones coming out every week lately. So, so thinking out of the box is not just about setting up a particular name, which is Blue Economy, and giving it a definition. I think experience shows that that's fine, but that usually is not enough. It's about inspiring a different way of thinking, a different mindset. What is really out of the box? What is really doing 1 + 1 = 3 and not always 2? And again, what is behind that is this level, which is not mathematical, because a lot of our models, our economical models, are very, very numerical and very strict. If we change to a more systemic way of thinking, a less linear way of thinking, then a lot more things are possible. To me, it's really about inclusion in the sense that it's not about throwing linear thinking out of the window and saying, we should ban that, we should do completely different. It's just that it's one way of thinking that has been very dominant for the last 300 years, roughly. But let's also embrace and start, focusing and training ourselves on this other way of thinking, which is called systemic, which can give us much more and can supply us, these skills, these ways of doing the things that make us take particular decisions, communicate with each other differently. That I think we've got a lot to learn about. So that's a lot of theory.
But it seems like something that's very, for me, a lot of this is relatively new. I come from more of the open source background, and I've been learning ever more about circular economy and related practices in the last year or so, as we've kind of grown this idea of open source circular economy and started the event. And to me, it kind of seems like the Venn diagram of circular economy and blue economy, there's a lot of overlap there, but there's some very key differences in perspective and in emphasis. And I think it seems like, certainly when you were talking about the idea of kind of inviting a wide range of different perspectives and looking for input from much different kind of, not from the usual suspects, I think that's something that really resonates with the open source point of view. What have you had much kind of encounter with the concept of open source? I noticed in one of your blog posts you were mentioning it, and I quite liked the perspective you had. Is this something that's relatively well known in blue economy in general, or do you see much potential for it in what we're doing with OSCEdays?
Yeah, in my experience, and I'll go a bit more into that later on, I think open source and this type of thinking is under development. I think a lot of people are very much interested in it, and a lot of people are working on it, but it's still very much unknown to the large public, to the big majority of people. And even those that sort of are keen on understanding what it could be, whenever you get to starting to make a bit of money, or whenever things change, then sometimes perspectives change. To go back about blue economy, the basis on blue economy is about sharing, is about open source. And perhaps another thing to highlight, blue economy is about communicating and making, telling, when I talk about the 180 or 190 cases that exist, these are cases of entrepreneurs and scientists already doing things. So the blue economy is not the inventor of all these innovations. It's about giving them, presenting them so that they can be of a source of inspiration for others. And yeah, that's why the foundations is pretty much sharing an open source. Perhaps more practical. So to go back to the entrepreneurs that grow mainly oyster mushrooms and mainly on coffee grounds, because you can grow other mushrooms, but oyster mushrooms are the ones that are, pretty the best in, pretty tasty. I think they're spectacular in terms of the way they look, aesthetics, in terms of protein and so on and so on. And they're much easier to grow than many other things. And you can grow them on coffee ground, but you can grow them also on the waste of breweries, the spent grains, so the solid waste of the grains before you make beer out of it. There's other organic waste and perhaps urban waste that can be used to grow oyster. So the Mushroom Learning Network is a network of entrepreneurs growing oyster mushrooms. Mm-hmm. We got together the first time about 1.5 years ago, and that happened in Rotterdam. There we have our friends called Rotter Zwam. So that's Simon and Mark Slegers and Simon Cox that have created that. We had a second reunion 6 months after that in Belgium. Each time we had about 20-30 people coming from about 5-6 different countries, getting together, exchanging thoughts and sharing ideas and sharing experience. Really experiences of, what not to do when you're starting up, what business models to work out. And when we wanted to go a bit further in sharing, a bit further in, okay, I need to do these trials. I want to know if the oyster can also grow on, you know, if I have a bit of tea in my coffee grounds, what happens, for example. Then you need to have more sharing put in place, and that's where we had a very big diverse of opinions. Some saying that as soon as you start to become successful, then the others perhaps are conceived as competition, even if they are in another country. Or yes, sharing, yes, but not with everybody. So do we need to sign something? Do we need to perhaps put a particular barrier, a money barrier, something else? I think these were fascinating questions, so we are still constructing. So I think this is the type of questions that one needs to have openly. And I think it's very important also to keep in mind the, you know, what perhaps you could call skepticism about, yeah, but if he's doing the same thing and he's successful, my God, I have a competitor now. It's very important to keep that in mind, because it's a bit sort of the things that we were grown up to think.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge to go beyond that, and beyond that is indeed, and that's okay. So that's part of the answer, and the other half of the answer is again a scientific and intellectual approach, which is one of the things that for me gives a lot of value to these things, and that is indeed the concept of autopoiesis. The concept of autopoiesis is something that was proposed by two neuroscientists from Chile, Maturana and Varela. They worked it out a lot, and then later on they worked out the same concept of autopoiesis, which I'll explain in a second, on a very small scale, which is molecular, on a bit of a larger scale, which is perhaps, I don't know, cellular first, and then molecular, and then perhaps an organism, and then why not the planet itself, or groups of people. And in terms of groups of people, that's where the whole question about open source comes in. Autopoiesis is a phenomena which is also called autogeneration, and it's this phenomena, it's this capacity for different elements to be able to generate new elements. So, for example, for simple molecules, to be able to be together in a cell. I'm making a circular gesture with my hands. And then it's the phenomena that allows you to make a new molecule which is perhaps more complex. So it is a proposal indeed also for explaining the whole concept of evolution. And it is also explaining creativity, how you come up with something new that didn't exist before. Voilà. That's as far as I'll go. There's much more. It's a lot of work. They've been going on it for 30 years. What is important here is that you identify elements inside, and that there's something like a membrane, something that identifies the people within. And I would like to propose, for example, whether it's oyster mushroom entrepreneurs or anyone else, to share. A membrane is never completely closed, but there is some kind of filter, and then it's up to anybody to put any type of filter they want to be able to to have this chemistry happening inside to generate new ideas and to generate more value, to generate new thoughts and more complex things. Yeah. So that's and then of course a catalyzer. If you have a catalyzer there, then it's even better.
And what do you think the community of OSCEdays is somewhat within its membrane at the moment, and also trying to expand as well and to grow in different ways. What do you think the people participating in this kind of growing movement in this event, what do you think we can learn from autopoiesis and the blue economy? Are there any particular lessons we should take from this viewpoint?
I think in terms of inspiration, there's a lot of inspiration that can be taken. What is really proposed by these people, and also a few other scientists like Prigozhin, it's a Russian name. He did his work in Belgium. works on distributive systems, which is about finding equilibrium in disequilibrium systems. Nothing is static in our lives, in any living system, or even in any organization. And before that, we never had any model, any ways of scientifically approaching that type of thing. And Prigozhin is the first one to do that. So I think it's a source of inspiration, because some of these people have indeed worked on how to interpret that also into organizations, into individuals as human beings, and also in groups of people. I think that I can recommend a few books, and it's really up to every individual to come up with the inspirations as they want, because there's a lot of richness, and if it has given me a few things, it will give you a few others, which will enrich things even more. And in terms of bringing all these things together, the main person is Fritjof Capra. Perhaps we could put it somewhere, written somewhere, anywhere.
And I'll put the link to your blog post as well that you wrote about Open Quest, and that mentions Fritjof Capra in there as well, so people can find out a little bit more about the idea there. So.
Yes, exactly. His latest book is called The Systems Views of Life. It came out this year. And it's about autopoiesis, it's about economic models, it's also about science and the evolution concept, but it's also about the case theory, which is really about the fact that you can be quite scientific and things, but that doesn't mean that you have to insist that we can predict things. So the predictability of things is a bit reductionist. So we're sort of, if we impose that we need to be able to predict things, then basically we're not allowing a lot of things to happen. Mm-hmm. It's about giving the focus on the system and not on the object. The object is quite linear thinking, which is one of the things that Descartes came up with, and the focus on the system is really that what allows things to evolve, allows value to generate, and for a group also to move forward. Yeah, is that answer?
So just finally, I'd just like to ask if you have, we have a lot of people in our community who are coming to grips with new concepts a lot, whether that be open source or whether that's just the idea of kind of collaborating and documenting your work to work with other people around the world, or whether that's circular economy, blue economy. A lot of people are kind of reaching out and discovering new ideas, and that's sparking off all sorts of interesting developments. But maybe you have some kind of some vision of where this could hopefully lead to, or some kind of words of encouragement for these people trying things out for the first time. Is there anything that you'd like to say to the community involved in OSCEdays at the moment, or any kind of vision for the future you might have?
Yes, in that sense, there's both the optimist and the less optimist point of view. I think that indeed there's a sort of a movement happening, and sometimes it's within this group, open source. There's also other people that are perhaps doing a lot of things under a different name, not necessarily connected, but working based on the same values. I'm based here in Paris. I like to work a lot with social entrepreneurs, which are a group of very young people, like Future of Waste, Make Sense, and so on. I'm also in an association of people which is founded by someone who is retired. There's a lot of things happening, and a lot of people doing similar things, or coming to the same conclusions, having followed different paths. To me, that's essential. That's really this confirmation, this affirmation that that things are happening. At the same time, I also know that the big majority of the population is not necessarily aware of it and is very skeptical. I saw a statistic the other day that last year the result was done in Norway of the number of people the population that really believes in, in the risks of climate change. And between 2008 and 2012 or 13, it had gone down. So there's more people that are not worried about it.
Yeah.
So again, you can do a lot of psychological analysis about the fact that I think it's something threatening, and when it's threatening, you prefer to do things that are a bit more, giving you a bit more peace of mind. So I think that's not to be ignored. So yeah, these are the two things. And again, my focus is quite scientific. It's where I get my inspiration. It's where I get my vision. If it's getting inspired by nature, I mean, makes all sense. And nature is not just the plants growing. Nature is also the Newton's apple falling off the tree and the speed that we can calculate. That's also nature. And if you are really sort of reconnecting and getting yourself an inspiration from nature in different ways, which is a very systemic approach, then yeah, that's the vision that, whether you apply it to growing mushrooms or doing something else, it should be going on in the right direction. It's important indeed to share, and things become very obvious to me at some points, and then I forget that it's not as obvious to others. So it's important to continue talking about it. Yeah, and to that I will add, because I was mentioning systemic. There's a work done at the University of Turin, the Faculty of Architecture and Design. Professor Bistagnino has worked a lot on that for the last about 30 years at least, and has done a lot of work to demonstrate that you can build systemic economic models where you have value generated by all flow of materials and energy, so no waste, but everything reused. Which is not only just, for example, in our agricultural cases that perhaps most of us are very familiar with, but also in other applications and in other industrial and geographical cases. So the work on systemic design of Mr. Bistagnino is quite inspirational also for the blue economy.
Fantastic. And I think it's really wonderful and really valuable that you mentioned this idea of many different people who might be kind of working in different communities or in different backgrounds, who are coming to similar conclusions or who have similar points of view. I think that's something that one of the reasons we set up OSCEdays was to ensure that people don't feel alone if they kind of are working on one particular issue and they have this vision that they might kind of feel disheartened if they feel they're working all by themselves. But it's great to be able to connect to other communities working on similar things. And I'm also glad you mentioned future of waste as well, because we as OSCEdays, we have a lot of future of waste DNA within us. We kind of spawned off from that as one of our starting points.
I like it. You say spawned off.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very inspiring to see what you're doing with your work, and I think it'll be an inspiration to the rest of the community as well. So thank you very much for sharing your perspective, and I'll be putting a couple of links in the description of this video so other people can get to know your work a little bit more deeply and connect with you if they want to. So yeah, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Sam. Okay.